Bending the rules for international students. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee. Let's have a look at this article from ABC News. And, well, I've been saying this is going to happen. There'll be more and more calls to bring international students into Australia for, well, a few reasons. One of them being, and we could see in this old article, just how significant funding from international student fees is for our different universities here in Australia, everyone. They've become addicted to it. They're a cash cow. I honestly feel sorry for a lot of international students, those that I studied with. They didn't get their money's worth from the course, but then again, well, even if Australians don't feel like we're getting our money's worth, imagine how it is for someone who's paying 4 times what you're paying. But our universities have become accustomed to it. Our property sector, well, all those apartments, they're not spiking. All that student accommodation, it's getting in trouble. Businesses are shutting down because they're dependent on this sector. I still remember the article we were reading about universities in Tasmania who were cutting courses and staff were letting go, and some of the staff had put all of their money into student accommodation. So they doubled down in the one sector, even though they were diversifying into property. The problem with the student accommodation is that it's only designed and specifically only allows international or students in there to stay. And they're tiny. You know, they're little tiny hotel rooms that are kind of a bit lower quality. So, you know, you can't really flip them into anything else. Calls to set up separate quarantine for international students as universities struggle with a collapsing business model. So there you go. There's calls to open up the floodgates, to you know, make it separate. Special treatment, everyone. And there's still Australians that can't get in the country, or they get in the country and they're expected to pay for thousands of dollars for forced quarantine. Awesome. A peak education body is lobbying. So it shouldn't be called a peak education body. A lobby group, an education lobby group, that's what they are, for a dedicated hotel quarantine program for international students that would allow them to fly into the country, vowing to pay whatever it takes to make it happen. Well, how much funding do the universities get from the government? So we're all going to pay for it anyway. I mean, come on. Universities, maybe they should be a bit smarter with their... Maybe they should be a bit smarter with their business models, everyone. So not being so dependent on one source of revenue. It just shows you they're addicted to this stuff. There's a lot of staff you can get rid of that you don't need at unis. Honestly, a lot of non-research, non-academic staff that just add burden to the process. It comes as new figures reveal the drastic drop-off in overseas students studying in Australia during the pandemic and the $1 billion this has had on the economy. There is no reason why we can't have charter flights bringing these students in, walking them across the tarmac into separate quarantine facilities that are not going to be competing with the hotel quarantine for Australian returnees, said Philip Honeywood, the CEO of International Education Association of Australia. The industry is prepared to pay whatever it takes for additional ADF and for police to ensure that it all happens properly, with only one point of entry and one point of exit. The latest government figures show there are currently 374,000 primary student visa holders in the country. This is down from a peak of 580,000 shortly before the pandemic began and 495,000 last March. The ABS came out last week and said it is actually a $9 billion hit to the economy, Mr. Honeywood said. We're down from $40 billion a year in 2019 to just $30 billion, which includes tuition fees, accommodation costs, entertainment, and all of the wonderful ways in which these young people spend money in our economy. So this is the thing. They just see them as a cash cow. They just see them as a cash cow, just to milk them. Milk the students for money. I wonder if they're going to, you know... Our dollar's pretty high now. There's going to be other options. Why go to a, G7 university or a Sandstone university here in Australia when you go to a nicer one in the US or the UK for the same money, or close to it? In a statement to the ABC about the proposed dedicated quarantine, Education Minister Alan Tudge said the government would consider any proposals from university. Of course it will. And here's the thing. They'll just open the floodgates. What are the optics on that going to look? Special treatment for international students. While there's still Australian families still on the other side of the world trying to get in. It's going to look horrible. It's even if they can set it all up and do it all properly, and the universities pay for it and the students pay for it, it's still going to look horrible. But it must be quarantine beds above those already in existence and must be signed off by the state's chief health medical officer. He added that while the number of students in the country was down, university enrollments of international students had only dropped 5%, with many studying online from abroad. What's the point then? What is the point? You're not going to get the culture. You're not going to even get to know anyone. Look at here. She couldn't even speak any English. Yeah, you're not going to get to learn English. That's the point. You know, the universities, the international students I made friends with at university actually made the effort of like working on group assignments with Australians or with people who could speak English. So you'd improve your English. That's the whole point. I remember sitting and having drinks with a guy from Tokyo and a guy from Tuvalu, a tiny island. You know, a city with millions of people in it, a guy from a little village, and we were getting drunk in the middle of Brisbane. That's what university is meant to be about. So government call, and we're both bitching about the quality of education. How terrible it was. Oh boy, there you go. See, there's some universal truths. So, in November, 63 students from overseas arrived in Darwin on a charter flight and spent 2 weeks in the Howard Springs quarantine facility before being allowed to attend classes in person. But the model has not been widely adopted. Mr. Honeywood said this meant Australia was falling well behind other countries in the competitive international education market, which is Australia's fourth largest export. Canada, and see, that's the thing. I feel sorry for people who come over here and they want to settle in Australia, and you want university-educated people settling here. You want the smarter people coming over here, okay? They're the ones you want to come. But then they'll rock up over here, they'll pay a fortune to do some master's degree, and they'll find, oh, wait a minute, I've got my master's in such and such, all I can get is a job changing bedpans. Awesome, yeah. And they end up, they'll move home, better quality of life, cheaper. You wait till they find out how much housing costs here in Australia. Canada and the UK, our two biggest competitors, have kept their borders open for a whole year and are flying international students in for face-to-face teaching in the universities, he said. New Zealand is now taking 1,000 returnee international students. We've only taken a bare handful into Darwin last year. We're really destroying an industry that has taken decades to build. The federal government has made it clear it is prioritising the 40,000 odd Australians still trying to return from overseas, and it is leaving it to the education institutions to sort out their financial stress. Well, I can understand that politically. The optics are going to be terrible, everyone. Last month, Prime Minister Scott Morrison said universities should consider changing their business model if they have become reliant on international students. There you go. ScoMo's right there. If they become too reliant on one sector, where's the lie? In a speech at Melbourne University last week, Mr. Tudgy reiterated the calls for universities to become more resilient. For more than a decade, the focus on international rankings has led to a relentless drive for international students to fund the larger research volumes that are required to drive up the rankings, he said. To be clear, we want the international students in Australia, but COVID presents us with an opportunity to reassess the impact our universities can have and to refocus on the main purpose of public universities, to educate Australians and produce knowledge that contributes to our country and humanity. Well, if you've ever looked at at just the research grants and look at some of the utter rubbish that is funded for research, I should do a video on it, because there's just some, you know what I'm talking about, all the gender studies, PhDs, all these things that it's kind of sad if you're just essentially proving common sense, or you're trying to, your argument gets disproven by common sense, and you need to spend years studying that to find it out. So simmering tensions with China. This week, the government announced that it was extending the ban on international travel for another 3 months until at least June 17. This is worrying for Anouk Darling, the CEO of Scape, a company that operates student accommodation across Australia. Well, of course, you're offering student accommodation. Of course you're going to be worried about it. The entire industry has grown up in Australia around so-called PBSA, purpose-built student accommodation. Well, yeah, we've seen them. We've seen these things. They're like maybe, one-room backpackers. With Scape recently putting the finishing touches on a new $100 million tower in Melbourne capable of housing 750 university students. It includes a pool hall, cinema, rooftop area, but is currently home to just a fraction of the students it can accommodate. PBSA supports over 5,000 jobs, but it is diversifying, of course, as a result of the pandemic. Every business has had to rethink its business model. Kelly He is an international student from China and one of the few residents of the Scape building. She said it was hardly a hive of activity. It's super quiet. It's only maybe a few people coming down to hang out and study, she said. She's also living through a period of increasing tension between China and Australia, with the Chinese government warning prospective students they could be subject to racist attacks. At the same time, a recent survey of 112 people and organizations by the Chinese Australia Chamber of Commerce found more than half believed Chinese attitudes towards Australian education had deteriorated during the pandemic. Well, maybe they're just starting to realize the quality of what they're getting, but still. Combined, these issues threaten to deliver a long-term blow to Australia's education sector. For her part, Ms. He said she had been subject to taunts during the pandemic, including people directing fake coughs and sneezes towards her, but she said she still would recommend Chinese students come to Australia. I mean, you're always going to get some twats. That's going to happen no matter where you go. And Mr. Honeywood said he was confident the historic ties would prove stronger than the current tension. The people-to-people links and the institution-to-institution links between Australia and China are very strong, he said. We have generations of Chinese students and students from many other Asian countries coming here, and we're quite confident that the people-to-people relationships will prevail in the absence of any directive from any government. Well, they may be right there. They may just be ignored. The government directives and the propaganda may just be ignored just as much as they can be here. But there you have it, everyone. The optics of potentially giving special privilege to international students to bring them into Australia ahead of Aussies, it doesn't look good. What do you think? Maybe should the sector diversify? I'm sure there's a lot of useless carbohydrates they could cut from their institutions. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and enjoy the content I create here, there are a few ways you can support us. You can join us on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us using our affiliate links from Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or AussieBroadband. You can buy merch from HeiseSays, use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Take care, have a great day, and I will see you all next time. Bye for now.